Hi, everybody. Welcome. I hope y'all are having a great Thursday. We can't wait to get started with another amazing Power2Fly chat and learn session. Before we do, I'm just going to go over some quick housekeeping items, especially important for those of us who maybe used to meeting on a different platform and now we're using GoToWebinar. So one thing that I want to highlight for all of you is participation. So we really encourage participation from our audiences. You can do this in a couple different ways. If you check out your GoToWebinar toolbar, there's going to be a space, a little drop-down menu for questions, and then there's another one for chat. So we highly recommend that if you have any questions that you'd like me to raise to our speaker today, please feel free to put those in the questions bank. We will try to make sure we get to everyone's questions there, as best we can. And if you have comments or you want to, connect with other people in the chat with you, go right ahead. I would do that in the chat window, like the little chat drop-down, as opposed to in the questions bucket. Now, the session is being recorded, so everybody that registered will be sent a link with an email, an email with a link in about 1 to 2 business days, so you'll probably get it about Monday next week. And it'll contain a link to where you can rewatch this recording on Power2Fly's website. Now, if this is just, something that, if Annie says something that's just amazing, you cannot wait, to share it with a coworker or friend or a relative, you don't have to. You can always head over to Power2Fly's YouTube channel. We'll post a video there as well. Now, if you, like I said, if you do want to write in the chat, that is great. If you have questions, please feel free to submit them. If you have a question and you want to ask it, but you want to be kept anonymous, that is totally fine. Just make sure that you DM the question to me in chat as opposed to sending the message to the group either in the chat or in the questions bucket. Now, a couple of things to know about Power2Fly, especially if y'all aren't familiar with us. You can keep up with us on our various social media channels. We are at Power2Fly on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. And if you check us out or subscribe to any of those accounts, follow any of those accounts, we share really great resources, posts from our blogs and videos and events like today. So definitely take advantage of those things. Now, we are here because we are going to talk a little bit about GoTo, and they are one of our Power2Fly's amazing partner companies. So in case you don't know about them yet, I'm going to share the link in the chat to where you can go check out their webpage on power2fly.com. It's going to look much like what you see in front of you now. And what you'll see there is a way to check out, not only so learn some more about GoTo as a company. You can also look at events, so that'll show you past events that they've collaborated on with us, as well as events that they're planning to join us for in the future. And as well as, obviously, you can check out their open roles. There are some really, really great ones there. I'm really excited to see, how many people we can, make more aware of GoTo as a company and see how many Power2Fly success stories we can write together with GoTo. Let's see here. I'm really excited now to introduce our speaker. Like I said earlier, Annie is here on behalf of GoTo. So Annie Brown is the head of global diversity, equity, and inclusion at GoTo. Now, she brings over 32 years of experience in the field of HR to this role, and she began her career working in employment law firms, helping to investigate claims of discrimination, harassment, delivering prevention training, as well as conducting trial preparation. Now, Annie brings a unique perspective as an employee who has faced discrimination, as well as an HR professional who has worked to prevent these situations and expertise, as well as, her expertise on the real realities, sorry, English is hard today, on the realities of how these claims move through the legal system, which I think is a very important perspective to have, since, the practicalities and the logistics of actually doing these things are sometimes vastly different from what is intended, by either the people that wrote the policies or the people that are going through them. Now, one thing to know is that, like I said, y'all are very much empowered to, take control and drive today's questions. So if you have questions that you'd like to ask, please feel free to put them in the questions bucket. What you're seeing in front of you are going to be some of the main takeaways that we're going to try and get to in today's discussion. Now, all of this to say, we decided on these based on conversations with Annie prior to today's session, as well as looking at the questions that you all submitted when you registered. So if you think that we may not get to your question, go ahead and ask it. If you think that, if you came up with another question, during the event, go ahead and ask it. If you want us to expand on something that we're talking about, let us know. We don't know what you want to know unless you tell us. So as long as you are speaking out, ask early, ask often. We really want to make sure that you all are as able to participate as fully in today's event as possible. So we're going to talk about what you need to know before you take a discrimination claim to HR. We're going to talk a little bit about how you can stand up for yourself as well as encourage others to do the same, which is sometimes much easier said than done. And we're going to talk about situations where leaving isn't actually quitting. And so I think that's a very, very important clarification to make, because it can feel like that a lot of times to people. So I'm really excited to jump in and talk to Annie about this. Annie, is there anything else you want to share with the audience before we get into our first set of questions?
No, I'm just so happy to be here, and I just want to say how great I think Power to Fly is. I've been a fan for a very long time, even before GoTo, and I think you are all ahead of your time. And just the opportunity and the thought of, standing up, I think we can go into the conversation with that. And I just want to do a shout out to Jorge Zavala and Crystal Diaz, who made this happen from GoTo for us today. So with that, I am ready if you're ready.
Awesome. Yes. Okay. All right. So let's dive in. A lot of people wanted to know, lots of specifics and stuff, but let's start with maybe like a baseline setting. Yeah. When is the time to go to HR? Because I feel like a lot of people are very unsure about well, should I not? Is it too early? Am I too late? What should people know about timing when it comes to bringing things like this to the attention of HR?
Yeah. Well, I think when people are starting to think about, okay, something's not right, I need to do something, I think there's probably already a lot of something that's gone on. Usually a lot of trial and tribulation, a lot of thought, what's really happening, and it's usually really hard, and we'll talk more about that. You almost don't want to believe what's happening. It can feel really nightmarish. You don't want to believe it. You don't know what to do. So, and like I said, we'll get into more of that. But my answer to that is, a lot of times some people are really strong and they want to try to address it with that manager. We'll talk about the process too, but the answer to that is at some point you are going to have to inform HR. Even if you address it on your own, you definitely are going to need to let HR know. Now, hopefully you have an HR department like we have at GoTo that's really evolved and really has great policies and wants to do what is right for the employee and what's right for everyone. It's not always the case, we know that, but no matter what ends up happening, the question is always going to be asked, did you let HR know? So whether you address it on your own, you still need to go to HR and say, hey, I talked to this person, I talked to the manager. You're going to want to let them know, because if it doesn't get resolved, if it doesn't get fixed, if it goes south after that and there's some kind of retaliation, we all know about that, they're going to want to be informed. So you can't miss that step no matter what. You just know that, and at some point you're going to have to do that.
Is it ever too late to go to HR? I feel like this is because you talked about, kind of like hemming and hawing, and I feel like there's a lot of times people, there's various reasons, but a lot of times people kind of wait very long because they don't want to be wrong. They don't want to be, but they also don't want to be alarmist. So is it ever too late to go to HR about something like this?
No, it's never too late. Like I said, even people that I've known that have decided, they've already gone and maybe sought outside counsel, and they've decided that they're going to maybe take some kind of a legal action. Even they're going to ask you, have you reported it to HR? So it is never too late. You're going to want to give them the opportunity to try to investigate it or resolve it however they think they can. It may not always be the best. They might not always do a great job. Hopefully they will. I'm going to be optimistic, like I said, that companies are really getting there and doing that education. And I think there are a lot of great HR teams out there that really are doing that these days. But you're going to have to. So it's not, there's no such thing as too late.
Okay. All right. So we talked, at least a little bit at the start about how these processes are supposed to go, what is the ideal process to escalate a discrimination situation at work?
Right. Ideal. So, okay. So ideal. I think we've probably been around enough to know that when you started working somewhere, maybe you paid attention or maybe you didn't. There was probably some kind of a training or something that someone gave you that said, okay, if you ever have an issue, if there's ever discrimination, this is the ideal process that you're going to follow, right? Ideally, you're going to let that person know, right? Hey, what you said, what you're doing, I don't appreciate that. That's not right. Like I said, sometimes it's just not possible. Or sometimes you'll tell that person and they'll continue the behavior, right? Or sometimes there's a power differentiation, and maybe you're not likely to go to somebody that's a lot higher up than you and feel powerful enough to confront it. It doesn't mean that you're weak. It doesn't mean that you're not strong. No judgment on you. And that's why you have a kind of a process involved. So if that's the case, go to somebody who you feel comfortable with. If it's not that direct manager, go to their manager. The rule is, let me just say, in the United States for the most part, that person that you report to that is a manager, they have a legal obligation that they have to do something about it, that they need to go to their HR department and report it. And there is a process that should begin from there. And that is ideal, okay? That is ideal. But we know that always doesn't happen. I have a friend that went through this just very recently. He's very senior in a company. He went to the VP, and the VP said, well, just kind of deal with it. Don't take it so hard, right? And this is a very high-performing individual.
Against, right?
Right? So we know this happens, but, so I love the word ideal, if only everything was ideal. So he ended up going to HR himself, right? And HR supposedly did an investigation, and they came back and they said, well, we've decided that there is no discrimination. Well, I can tell you from what he told me that there certainly was. And that happens a lot. So, the process is, he went through the process, right? He actually did try to tell the manager first. That didn't work. He went to a senior person. That didn't work. He went to HR, and they kind of took the stance, we're just going to protect the company. And the investigation they did was really kind of bogus, I would say. And so, now he is taking other steps. And that happens sometimes. Now he's concerned about retaliation. So, that happens, and that's typical. I have to brag a little bit because, where I work, we have a really overreaching policy that talks about retaliation and talks about a zero tolerance for that. And I'm really proud that we have that. And we had a conversation yesterday with our women, the women employees group, and we talked about, not feeling empowered to maybe say something. And these are very bright, smart, intelligent women that are very professional. And so we talked about, when you're in that moment, how hard it is to sometimes advocate for yourself. And so we were offering up to each other, if we're ever in that circumstance, just going to whoever you need to go to get that help, right? So sometimes I think the ideal process is finding that person, that friend that's going to help you get to HR, and helping to hold your hand to get there. So whatever you need to do to say what you need to say to get the help that you need, I think that is the ideal process.
Okay. We are getting some really good questions in the chat here, so I'm going to try and get to a couple of these.
All right.
One person had asked, what if you're let go before you can even go to HR? And this is a good one, because I feel like there are plenty of situations where, it's all a blur, right? It all seems to happen all at once, and then you step back from it and realize, like, oh, wait, that was not okay, and I didn't get to tell anybody that was not okay.
Right. Yeah, that definitely happens, and usually there's a word for that we call like constructive termination. There can be so many situations that go into that. So at that point, you're probably not going to call HR and say, this is what happened. So we're going to give you some resources of what you can do. And probably the first thing I would do in that situation, I would take a deep breath. I would start to bullet point everything that happened in the scenario that led up to that, right? So, and again, discrimination, I say this a lot. Being a jerk to someone at work is not discrimination. But being discriminated based upon something that's protected, you know, your race, your sex, your gender, your sexual orientation, you know, a disability, you know, some of these things that are listed in Title VII, and again, we'll give you the resource that lays all of this out, that is discrimination, or if it's harassment, right? So it has to be one of these things. It can't just be someone was a jerk to me based on, I don't know, something that's not one of those things, right?
Yes.
Based on that they didn't like your pink hair that I think is so awesome. That's not okay, right? I mean, that is not legal harassment. Unfortunately, maybe someday it will be. But yeah. So it has to be based on that. And then what you're going to do, you're going to write your story down, you're going to collect your thoughts, and then you're probably going to want to either go to the EEOC and look at what you need to do, or you're going to want to find an attorney in your, you know, in your state, and talk to someone and explain what happened and help them advise you on what you can do and really help you understand, do you have something that is, you know, considered legal harassment, and were you terminated based on this, and what can you do? Because now you've faced a loss, right? You've lost your income, you've lost your job, so you might have grounds actually for a claim.
Excellent. And just because this is a question I got asked a ton when I was still, you know, we talked about how I was paralegal for a couple of, like 5 or 6 years. I would get questions like this all the time. Especially if you're concerned about like cost for it, call legal aid. Find your local legal aid office. Even if you don't qualify for free legal services, they will know of attorneys they can direct you to that have lower costs or, you know, pricing plans, that kind of stuff. Like, go to these resources even if you don't qualify for help through them. They are a really good entry point to try and find someone who can help you and not, you know, have to bankrupt yourself to do so.
Absolutely. That's great advice. Very good.
Sorry for my soapbox.
No, and you came from a legal background. Let's add that. We have that connection. So
yeah, that's true. We
love that.
Okay, so we're going to go through and get to some more questions here.
Yes.
A lot of people wrote in questions basically asking how to decide if you should speak up or if you should let this go. Obviously, it's probably going to be different for everybody, but are there any like, you know, metrics that you recommend? Are there any steps that we can take to kind of parse through this on our own?
Yeah. So whether we should do something or not, is that what we're kind of trying to tell? Well, this, you know, it's really a personal decision. I like to call it my big cousin rule, big sister rule, you know, whatever applies, whatever tugs at your heart. You know, I like to think, what would you do? What's going to happen if you don't do something, right? What's the consequence if you don't do anything? And for me, I like to think, what would you advise your little sister, your cousin, your child to do? And for me, I've just always been the kind of person that I can't just not do anything. I think for me, after the George Floyd incident happened, it just really shook me even more, because I have an 8-year-old son, and I thought, how can we be here, you know, in this day and age, and we're still dealing with this? So my call out is, if we don't start doing something, then what is ever going to change? Like, when is this ever going to be different if we don't call out these offenders? And we have to do it. I mean, that's just me. And, you know, I've dealt with, you know, people in many different cultures. And, you know, the sad thing is that this has been such a condition for so many people that are not the majority for so long, that it is so typical for, if you're Black or Hispanic or a woman, or to just go, well, this is the way it is and this is what happens to us. So you just leave and you try to find something else. And to me, that's just not changing anything, right? So I think my test is, you got to do something. We just got to be stronger, and we just got to do something. So again, it's a personal choice, and I'm not going to sugarcoat it, because it can feel like you're in a nightmare, because it's emotionally trying. Trying to prove it is really hard, because a lot of times discrimination isn't just coming up and calling you an outright terrible name. It's usually very subtle. There's microaggressions. It's a pattern. For me, I've been told things like, I can't present, I can't do things. It's been really like a pattern over like a year's time. And I'm like, how am I going to prove this? Or who's going to believe me? Or don't you see this? So it's not easy. But, I don't know. So I guess my answer to that is, what happens if you don't do anything? Are you going to let the next person suffer the same thing? So.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it. And honestly, like, I make a lot of my decisions based on that. Like, what is the worst possible outcome of making this choice, and can I live with that? And I like how you kind of address the fact that, not everybody can. Not everybody is resourced enough to be able to, take that kind of risk. And that is okay. Like, that is all right. If that's what you need to do to make sure that you have food on your table, I get it. I feel like anybody that's going to blame you for not saying something in that position is someone that really doesn't understand where you're coming from. But it is also why, if you can say something, I do feel the responsibility to say something, because, like, even if nothing changes, you've at least made it either part of the record or something, so that if this happens again and the next person that follows you gets similar treatment, no one in HR is going to be blindsided by this. There is a paper that says this person has done something like this before, or at least someone claimed this person did something like this before. And I love that idea of kind of thinking about it in terms of like a little sister or something, because I find it much easier to take care of someone that's not myself than to take care of myself.
Exactly. I have the same issue. So there you go.
Yeah. Okay. So we talked a little bit about those kind of microaggressions, right? And things that take place over time and kind of build up, but it's slow. Does your advice for handling discrimination differ when those microaggressions aren't within the stereotypical, like, buckets that we usually think of, right? We usually think like race, gender, sexual orientation, those kinds of things. This person wrote in saying that their experiences involve age discrimination and neurodiversity issues. So does your advice differ if it's not one of, let's say, like the big three?
I don't think it differs at all. I will say that, age, well, let me start with the neurodiversity, actually. I think that it's something that we haven't had as much awareness on or education on. And, for anybody that listens to this and they are on the side of the, in the HR departments, or, it's really important that we start learning more about that, because especially with, neurodiversity and cognitive disabilities, it's as unique as the person. So it really takes a lot of patience, and, we're all busy and we want to just kind of put things in boxes and buckets and move along, and we can't really do that. So, the advice is the same, but I think it can be more challenging because, as a society, we just don't understand it as well. And then as far as age, it's those microaggressions, I think, are, we're kind of accustomed to them. Like even when job applications, like fast-paced environment, or so-and-so is slow. I mean, or we need somebody tech-savvy. Like all of those kinds of things in certain ways assume or kind of weed out, or, I don't know. Those are microaggressions towards age. And a lot of that discrimination, I feel, happens even on the hiring end before people are even hired. So it's a little harder. So, but So dealing with them, I think, can be more difficult. I think proving it can be harder. So my advice really isn't different. I think we have a long ways to go to get better at it. But
Yeah,
I would say
agree.
we're not that advanced in the other areas either, but it's even more challenging.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I identify as someone who's part of the neurodiverse community. I live with bipolar disorder, and it is staggering the number of people that think like neurodiversity is limited to people with autism or Asperger's, or people that don't necessarily experience the kind of, the kind of impact on their life that something like that can bring. And so yeah, it's incredibly something that needs to be more talked about, if only so we can get a better sense of, what is needed.
Yeah.
Is this, so you had shared a couple links with us, and I've shared those in the chat. I'm going to keep sharing them as well.
Okay.
But one thing that Annie had said earlier is, go to the EEOC website, or you can even go to the ADA website, and you can get information about like what is legally protected, what is not, what are some common accommodations that you can ask for, or changes that you can ask to be made so that things like racial discrimination or gender discrimination are, at least you're proposing some solutions. So definitely do that.
Yeah.
Okay, so we had one person that wrote in, and this broke my heart. This person said, I'm regularly told by management how articulate I am. This is not an uncommon trait in my coworkers, both for native English speakers like myself and those who speak multiple languages besides English, and yet it's the praise that I hear most often. I often wonder if management finds this quality surprising because I'm a woman of color. And I feel uneasy about this comment and worry that I might be overly sensitive or reading something into it. How would you recommend that we evaluate similar situations to determine if we're actually experiencing microaggressions?
Okay. Well, I first want to say, no, you're not being overly sensitive. And let's just translate that microaggression, because saying how articulate you are, that translation of that microaggression really is people of your race, whatever your first language is, I guess, are usually not that intelligent. I mean, really, that is what that microaggression means, okay? So no, you are not being too sensitive. And I don't know if the question is what you should do about it. Is that what she's wanting to know? Or
it sounds like what they're trying to get to is like, how can we evaluate these situations to figure out, because that's one of the things I really found interesting. I sat through a training on this a couple weeks ago, and they talked about how you can't decide if someone is offended or not. Like, so no one can tell you shouldn't be offended, right? But I totally understand where this person's coming from, because if it's meant as a well-intended compliment and just not really reading the room right or understanding how that might be taken, that's one thing. But if it's absolutely a backhanded compliment and really one of those things that is insidious because people get away with it, how should we weigh those situations on our own? Is there a guidepost for us of like, okay, did the situation do blank, blank, blank? If yes, then it's a microaggression. Is it that simple, or is it just murky?
Well, I think you really have to go with your intuition on that, in that situation. I know for me, a lot in my role, people will say to me things like, oh, that's what you do for a living, my family, my children, we don't see color at all. And so I usually take that as a learning opportunity. At GoTo, we talk about, how we are always wanting to keep growing. So we talk about that a lot, because sometimes people just really don't know. So if it's an opportunity where you can pull someone aside and say, hey, let me tell you about that. Let me tell you why, when you say that, what it really means and how that is hurtful to this community. And that can be exhausting. So it's not your job to do that. Literally, it kind of is my job to do that. and I, again, with the same sense of I am so tired of where we are right now, and I don't want my son to continue and his kids to continue in this, that I am so motivated in this point in my life to just like share with people, because I don't want that, ignorance to continue. So that's me. But I think you have to take the whole situation into consideration. But I would encourage you, this is a power to fly. We are in a power to fly talk today. So let's see where in those moments that we can help each other and help people understand that, because I don't know how else we change it. If we just stay quiet, I don't know how else we change it. So if you can do it with, graciousness and compassion, and just in those little moments, find the right way to tell people, what that means in a kind way, I say go for it. That would be my suggestion. And you're not being too sensitive. It is what it is.
Yeah.
I love that they're called microaggressions, because they're not, it's death by, what do they say? Death by 1,000 paper cuts. That's what microaggressions are.
Yes. Well, and you're right. It's one of those things where you do have to look at the context, right? Because you are, as someone who's in the middle of it, hopefully you have, a good handle on, what the players in the situation and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I mean, if it's something that's still bothering you, like ask about it. Either go to HR. My favorite thing is to ask the person, like, hey, I know that you said blah, 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 and I'm sure you didn't mean fill in the blank, but could you explain to me what you meant by that? Because I'm still kind of confused. Like, you're giving them the opportunity to like change their tune and explain what they were actually trying to say, if they really were trying to give you a compliment, or you give them an opportunity to understand how that came across, and I'm sure you didn't mean it that way. So you're giving them this huge opportunity, and if they don't take it, then they are stepping firmly across that into jerk territory.
Well, there you go. You know what? And I'm the kind of person, I never think about it on my toes in the moment. So it sounds like in this situation, it's been a more than a one thing. So it sounds like you can kind of rehearse your plan and come back into it with the action that you're going to do.
Oh yeah.
Right? Maybe you can recruit some help.
Yeah, like I'm not very glib in the moment, especially when it's like a conflict scenario. So please don't feel like if you can't speak up in the moment that you lose your chance. Like that's not at all the case here. Okay, so when we're moving on from from identifying these issues for ourselves, and we're moving kind of into the advocacy portion, how should you handle if you're seeing discriminatory actions from the C-level suite? This person had also given us a little bit more context, saying that visible diversity is not present at that level. But I'm really interested to see, how you would think this should be handled.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the case, unfortunately, for a lot of companies, that the C-suite is not yet very diverse. So, I feel being in the C-suite is a huge privilege, and I think it's a call out to companies when we're interviewing in the C-suite that we are, first of all, asking specific questions about diversity, like how have you been involved in diversity, and what changes have you, been or done in your past companies to, affect diversity, and what learning have you done on your own to understand diversity. So that should happen first. But again, with the growth mindset and the idea of keeping, ourselves in the space of wanting to keep learning and growing, if it is something that maybe was just we didn't know, I think everybody should have the opportunity to learn. Yet at the same time, I think that the C-suite should be held most accountable. So I think it's imperative that we take probably the most swift action, because everybody is seeing it. And, don't imagine or don't pretend that, if you're seeing it, that other employees aren't seeing it. So it is really imperative that you don't look away, and that those are critical moments for the company. And, we at GoTo, our philosophy is that it's from the top down and the inside out. So we are starting with our C-suite with, looking at what our commitments are to diversity, and then trying to look at the inside out rather than doing flashy things on the outside. I usually don't do talks like this, it's usually like, what are we doing internally to work on ourselves? So it's all about the top. And if there is any discrimination happening, at the C-suite level, it really needs to be eradicated. I don't know what else to say. I mean, really, there's just no room for it. It's a privilege. It's a whole new day. It's a privilege to be in the C-suite. And in this day and time, if you're not sensitive to those kinds of things, and you're not, it's like, you wouldn't hire someone in the C-suite that doesn't know how to read a P&L. In my opinion, you wouldn't hire someone in the C-suite that isn't educated around DE&I.
Yeah, I honestly very much consider it the same way. Like this really should be treated like, computer skills or like, good communication skills. It should be a thing that is not a plus. It should be a baseline. And obviously we have a lot of work to do to get there. All right, so we had another person that wrote in asking more on the neurodiverse side of discrimination. This person says, I'm neurodiverse and I found that my reliance on being direct or avoiding sugarcoating when communicating is really unhelpful when it comes to conflict resolution. Good for you for realizing this. This took me years, so good for you. What are some ways that I can better communicate my needs to HR or management and advocate for myself, especially in a conflict scenario? I, again, struggle with this entirely. I really want to know how you would advise someone to handle something like this.
Yeah. Well, I think you and I were just talking about it. It's kind of like that ability to think of something on the fly. I always tell people you don't have to have the answer right away. I think it's really important that you're communicating what you need. And so, I think it's important to say, hey, I need time and I want to communicate because this is really important. So I need to step away and I need to use whatever tools I have to communicate exactly the best I can what it is I need and then come back. I think all too often we feel the pressure that we have to say and know right in the moment. And especially, in cases of neurodiversity, like I said, a lot of us don't know or don't understand. And I had, just the other day, I had somebody explain it to me in a great way. We were going kind of off on a tangent, but it was like they want me to do something in a way, but I don't have the capability of doing it that way. It would be like me asking you, or asking me to have me change my eye color to blue. Like I just can't do that. And so we have to be really sensitive to that. And so, but you have to ask for what you need. And again, like at GoTo, we have a new employee resource group called ADAPT. And speaking to kind of what you said, with your neurodiversity, and I'm dyslexic, we got together and we talked about what do people at work with disabilities want you to know. And we just started having this conversation. And, all these people with hidden disabilities started talking about what it's like at work. And we share a lot of challenges, but a lot of them are unique. So, we're planning to have a lot more roundtables because obviously we all have lots of, it's simple things really, like sometimes we just need another screen to do our work faster. But we have to communicate it and it's so common, but until we start talking about it, we all feel like, I'm really different or I better not say that. So, write down what you need, and I hope that your HR team is as awesome as ours and are willing to listen and, and get you what you need because they should be accommodating that for you.
Yeah. Now, to touch on something that we've talked about a couple of times here, you talk about, not needing to have the solution in the moment or not needing to, know what you want to say right then. Are there any benefits that you see to, like you said, kind of stepping back, taking that time, like crafting what you want to say? Do you think that carries any more weight than maybe, being able to respond in the moment would?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely, especially when you're talking about harassment or discrimination. Let me tell you that when you're trying to navigate all of that, you have the right to get help, get support. I know when I've gone through it, I have friends that are attorneys. I have friends that are in HR. I've relied on my sister to read things for me. I've relied on everyone and everyone I can. And let me tell you that your HR team is doing the same. They're getting legal counsel. They're doing all that probably in the background to help them make their decisions as well. And so you absolutely have that right to do that. I've had, friends come to me when they're going through it and they said, oh, my HR team says I have to have a response by tomorrow. No, you don't. Tell them you need 48 hours. Tell them you need till next week. Don't feel that pressure. You need to take the time to think through, and, you can't be unreasonable either, but, it's okay to say, I need the time. I need to make a decision. It's fair. You get fair time too. Absolutely.
I like that. And it can be very hard to remember, especially when you feel like you're I always feel like I'm somehow asking for special treatment from people when that's not what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to level set. And so it can feel really uncomfortable, and you feel like, well, they're already making accommodations for me. How can I ask for something else? And it's like, no. For me, the whole conversation changed when I stopped thinking of it in terms of mental health and started thinking about it in terms of physical health, at least because I have a situation that's not really visible. And so I thought about it in terms of glasses. I need my glasses to see. The idea that I don't have glasses is kind of dumb. So if you need glasses, you would ask for glasses. If you were in a wheelchair, you'd ask for a wheelchair accessible desk. So why should this be any different?
Exactly. Well, and another red flag as I'm thinking about it is if, whoever's helping you, your employer, it shouldn't feel adversarial. The moment it starts feeling adversarial, that should be a red flag. If they're in it to help you, it should be a collective, a team effort. It should not be an adversarial thing. It should be collectively working together to help them help you so you can do the best at your work, right?
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so we have a little over 15 minutes left in today's session. These always go incredibly quickly. So if you have questions that you'd like to ask, please feel free. I'm going through the questions that were submitted so far, and a lot of them we're going to touch on in conversations or questions that we're going to ask. So I'm going to go through here and try and make sure we at least, I know which are maybe outliers, so we can try and touch on this subject as well. Okay. We had a lot of people that asked about what to do when you are these microaggressions or discrimination instances are coming from your direct supervisor or someone who's basically unassailable at the company. How do you recommend people handle it when they are potentially having to make these make these reports to HR or something in a way that really they can't follow the chain of command because the person that's above them is the person that's responsible.
Yeah. Well, I think in that situation, if I heard right, I think then you need to go to HR. I think that's your solution. If it's somebody above you, if it's your direct supervisor, I think too, like I said, we were having this conversation in a just kind of a community conversation the other day. And it was great to see, my advice to them was go to whoever you're comfortable with. It could be another leader in another area, that you trust. If it's someone that you can communicate to and you feel comfortable with, they are legally obligated to report it. So, if you are, I'm trying to think, if you're in one part of the company, but somebody in accounting, for example, and they're a leader or a manager in accounting, you feel really comfortable, go tell them. You just have to get to the person that you're comfortable with. And if they need to go with you to HR and that helps you, do it. But you have to do it. There's just no way around it. Somebody asked me, well, what's the way around it to HR? Well, there isn't. You're just going to have to face reality. There isn't. And it's too bad, it's too bad that some teams just don't feel that comfort level. It makes me sad. It makes me sad for, those great HR practitioners and that's sometimes the case. Or maybe it's not even that they're not great. It's just kind of the fear that it's official and I'm reporting it. But that's a good thing. It's a good thing to make it official. You're doing the right thing, and you should feel good about that. And if it's scary, that's normal. And like I said, it doesn't make you weak. It doesn't, it's the right thing. And, your company should have a policy about, no retaliation. And most states and, have, and federally, there's protection against retaliation. Now, whether your company follows it or not, like I said, if it comes to anything, you will be protected around that. So, be strong and do it, but find someone to help you. You're not going to be alone. You're going to find someone who's been through it before. Let me tell you that, right? I mean,
Oh, yeah.
I'm sure you can talk to 3 people and 2 out of the 3 will have gone through it. They might not readily admit it until you bring it up, but I'm sure most people have gone through it.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing once you speak up about something like that, how many people come out of the woodwork and are like, oh yeah, I also had that. Like,
right?
You got to talk about these things. It's truly paramount.
Well, and to your point earlier, I think it's so important, when you go to HR, the other thing that's important is maybe somebody has already reported this person, and if you don't go, they won't know. And that happens a lot. That, oh yeah, we're aware of this person. This is number 2 or number 3. So really important.
That's always the point that I follow up with, like, okay, so what?
So now what?
Aware. That's great.
Yeah.
What has happened since you were made aware?
Yeah.
And that's hard, right? That is really hard to ask a question knowing they don't want you to ask it. That's different. But I'm very much reminded of my mom's a great collector of fridge magnets with inspiring things on them. And one of the ones she has says, scared is how you feel, brave is what you're doing. And I really liked that because it was like, it's okay to be scared. It's okay to be scared the entire time you're doing it.
Yeah.
It's okay.
But you know what? After, there's never been I regret that you do it, honestly. I mean, you always feel stronger and, always. It's empowering when you do it.
The only person you're proving something to is yourself. Taking care of yourself like that is very hard, but it's very important.
Yeah.
Okay, so we had a lot of people ask questions around how to help, even if you're not part of this. One of the questions was more specific and wanted to know your opinion on bystander intervention, since this seems like it can either be helpful or harmful, and there's not really a lot of gray area in between there. So what do you think of people speaking up when they see these things happening to others?
Yeah. Well, bystander intervention is, it's a training, it's a philosophy, a psych theory from the 60s, and it's all about, you've always heard power in numbers. It's kind of the opposite of that. It was studies that they did that individuals are less likely to help a victim if there's a group. And it happened to do around a murder case, which was really sad that a woman was murdered and there were a group of people around and nobody did anything, which is really amazing to think about. But they say there's 5 steps that you should do. And the first is you notice that there's a problem. The second is you interpret it as a problem. And then you decide you're going to take responsibility for it. You have an understanding that you have knowledge of, that you're going to fix the problem, and then you're going to help. So that's really what this bystander theory or intervention is. I think it is super critical, especially in the office work setting or virtual work setting, when you hear or see something happen. And I think there's different ways to go about it, depending on your comfort level. I know for me, a lot of times if I heard something, we're mostly virtual. So if I hear something on a call or somebody makes me aware of something, I tend to kind of like to bring the person aside separately and have a conversation. Letting it go is just, not something that I'm okay with. Usually what I find out is if you let something go, it usually gets worse or bigger, or it's not the first time. I've never
first time. No one is ever that lucky to be the first person that person never discriminated.
Right? I mean, yeah, usually not. And it usually just doesn't go away. So not saying anything is just really not an option. And you know what? It's like everyone else usually is feeling so uncomfortable too. So you're usually doing a favor. And the other thing that's really interesting about this is once you have that conversation, you might want to talk about that person bringing whoever was in the room back together and saying, hey, you know, Annie told me about that, and now I'm aware of it, and I'm really sorry about it, because it's a really like awkward feeling to leave it unfixed. It'll come up again in conversations like whatever happened, or so even though you want to take maybe somebody aside and talk about it, bringing whoever was in the virtual room or whatever back together and kind of wrapping up the conversation and looping it back together and putting a nice little sentence at the period at the end of the sentence on it is really a good idea. I know some people are like, can say it out in the middle of the room and say, hey, that's not right. You know, if that's your style and you can do it in a way good for you, maybe that works depending on the level of the people in the room and the trust of the people in the room. You know, it depends. But I think we need to do more of it. I'm for it.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Okay, so coming from a slightly different perspective, when, for lack of a better way to term it, to avoid white savior complex, is there anything that people need to think of as like a prerequisite to getting involved? Like, do you have to know that something is happening? Do you have to know that you can fix it? You know, what should people think as like the minimum of like, now you should get involved?
I don't know. No, I mean, I don't.
Okay. No, this is why I asked. Is like, you know,
yeah,
these are things that people ask about.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great question. I think you have to have a comfort level with it. I don't think you have to feel like you have to have all the answers to it. And, you know, I know even in, you know, the training that they do for bystander intervention, it's like, know how to fix it. You know, I think if we all knew how to fix everything, we wouldn't be having this conversation. But I think if you can just bring the awareness to the person, you know, I think that's enough. I think we know when we know something's wrong. So I think speaking out, even if you don't know the entire answer to it, is better than just letting it pass.
Yeah.
And I hope I heard the question right. I hope I heard you. You cut out there for a second. So.
Yeah. All right, so we've got 6 minutes left. I'm going to try to get to one more question here, and then we're going to talk a little bit about GoTo before we jump. But let's talk a little bit about, you know, about leaving a company. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where leaving was the best option for you? And if so, would you share with us how you made that decision?
Yeah, this is a great question. You know, I grew up in a family where work ethic is everything, and I always think, oh, you can never leave, you can never give up. And I've come to learn that leaving sometimes is not giving up, that leaving can be empowering. And I'll tell you about a situation generally that happened to me. I was really young, and there was somebody that was very harassing, and I was just going to leave the situation. I had actually let them know about it, but I was going to leave, and I wasn't going to do anything about it. I was just going to go on to my whatever was next. And a friend of mine, who was kind of like a father figure to me at the time, said, well, what if you don't do anything about it? And, you know, back to what we talked about before, I thought, oh my gosh, what if he does this to somebody else? Like, I really couldn't live with myself. And so I did something about it. And when I filed a claim, a lot of other women came forward. And these women were much more seasoned than me, had a lot more experience than me, were much older than me. And they said the same thing happened to me. And at first I was a little angry, like, why didn't you do anything? But then it was wonderful because they were in places in their careers where they were really able to support me and really empower the whole process and give me a ton of support, which was fantastic. So leaving was super empowering. I think, you know, in thinking about this, I don't think I'd be where I am today, doing what I'm doing today, had that whole situation not happened. So leaving can be a good thing. And how you do it is really up to you. But I'm with you, Meg, that, I think if you do decide to leave, whether you file a claim or whatever, you've got to let them know what went on. I mean, I think you've got to notify them of whatever the situation is, give them as much detail. I'm all for, filing the claim if there is a claim there to do it, because I think it makes a point if the company itself is not, ready, is not willing to fix the situation one way or another.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I unfortunately have been in a similar situation and did absolutely everything I could, and by the time everything played out, it was more worth it to me to leave than to stay in a situation that I knew wasn't going to change and was going to continue to negatively impact me, both like in, kind of my mental health and all of that, but also like there was going to be no more opportunity at this company. I was going to be basically blackballed, and it sucked, frankly. It was the hardest decision I've ever had to make, because I was very proud of getting that job, but it wasn't, at the end of the day, it wasn't worth it. And everything that I went through to get to that point where I realized, like, this is the end of the road. They're not going to try and meet me any further than this. That was hard, but it was, I mean, if I hadn't left, I would either still be there or I would have gone nuts by now.
Yeah.
Because it was truly not a good place.
And I'm so glad you shared that, because I think, when that happens, you think, what's wrong with me, or why, like you internalize it. Right?
It's like you didn't try hard enough or something.
Yes. And I look at you and I'm like, you are so intelligent, and look at you. And, I think it's important that we say that, because it's, I don't know, it's them, it's not you.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Well, so just so many people, it's not just women that get sexually harassed at work. It happens to a lot of people. All right.
Yeah.
We are at the end of our time. We only got 2 minutes left. So I want to talk a little bit with you, Annie, about GoTo. Now, I'm really excited to ask about your tips for interviewing. Are these just like GoTo specific, or do you recommend these for people who are interviewing no matter where?
Oh, yeah, no matter where, for sure. Absolutely. I mean, GoTo is really great, but I suppose no matter where.
Okay. Well, obviously. One of the lines in here says to have questions prepared that you want to know. I tend to have like a list with me of like 2 that are really like business kind of based, and maybe one that's more like fun, like what's your favorite company activity that your company does for its employees or something like that. Do you recommend having a couple like up your sleeve, or is there maybe like one that's your go-to?
Oh, well, I think I love what you do. I always, have them prepared for sure. Another one is I love asking the interviewer about themselves. That's always a good one. Yeah, get them to talk about themselves. And you might ask them what they love about the company too. But yeah, I like what you said, like your favorite company activity. That's a good one. That's really good.
Try to pick something that can't be Googled or like isn't readily available on the website, because those things I feel like people tend to go through at the start of an interview, and it's like, pick something maybe a little bit below the surface. I've also asked questions even though when I knew the answer, because you want to show interest. So
I think a good one after today is like, what's a challenge that you might have had at your company, and how did the team or your HR department handle it? There you go.
What, like that? That's a good one. Yeah. All right. So we are at the end of time. Oops, sorry, I had hair stuck in my mouth. I just want to say a huge thank you, Annie, to you. It was wonderful, and we're so honored that you took time out of your day to, not only be here with us now, but there was all kinds of prep on the back end, and you've just handled everything so wonderfully. I just want to say thank you for spending the last hour talking to us. It's been wonderful for me.
Well, thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure. I hope that somebody that needed to hear something out there heard something that they needed to hear, and for that, it's what a pleasure. And like I said, so good to spend time with all of you at Power to Fly. Thanks for having us.
Thank you. If you are part of our Power to Fly community, if you are, one of our returning frequent flyers, we're so happy to have had you join us today. If this was your first Power to Fly event, we hope you had an amazing time and can't wait to see when you join us again for another event. I have put a couple links in the chat to where you can check out the rest of our live virtual events. They're all free. I've also put in another link to check out GoTo's company page on powerfly.com. And I hope that this has been a very enjoyable time for all of you. And I hope everybody has a safe, happy, healthy, rest of your Thursday going on into the weekend. That's going to round us out for today, but we hope to see you again soon. Bye, everybody.